What if the reason you feel drained, distracted, and stuck has nothing to do with motivation and everything to do with what you do alone? Ancient traditions warned about it. Modern culture laughs it off, but people who quit for 6 months report changes no one prepared them for. Ancient roots few people question. Long before this habit became private, casual, and unquestioned, it was treated very differently. Ancient civilizations didn't see sexual behavior as neutral, they saw it as powerful, dangerous if mishandled, sacred if controlled. In Egypt, India, early African traditions, and even pre-Christian Middle Eastern cultures, sexual self-control wasn't about shame, it was about strength. The ability to govern desire was seen as proof of inner authority. Priests, mystics, warriors, and rulers were often required to practice restraint, not because pleasure was evil, but because energy was limited. Sexual energy was believed to be life force, creative power. The same force used to bring life into the world was thought to fuel vision, courage, clarity, and spiritual sensitivity. To release it without intention was considered wasteful, even dangerous. That's why many ancient rituals strictly regulated when, how, and why sexual acts occurred. It wasn't casual, it wasn't random, it was deliberate. In early spiritual traditions, sexuality was tied to purpose. It happened within ritual, covenant, or sacred timing. Outside of that, it was believed to weaken the individual. Not immediately, but gradually, like a slow leak. You wouldn't feel the loss at first, but over time, something essential would fade. Then something changed. As societies evolved, rituals faded, sacred structures collapsed, sexual behavior slowly moved out of temples and traditions and into isolation. What was once guided, witnessed, and restrained became private, hidden, and frequent. No ceremony, no intention, no accountability, just impulse. And that shift wasn't loud. It didn't come with warnings or alarms. It happened quietly, generation by generation, until the idea of sexual self-control felt outdated, even suspicious. But ancient traditions warned about this out of fear. They warned because they believed what you do in private shapes who you become in public. And that belief leads to a much more unsettling question. If sexual energy was once guarded so carefully, what did they know that we stopped asking? The energy theory most modern people ignore. Most modern conversations stop at the physical level. Relief, stress reduction, sleep. End of discussion. Ancient traditions didn't stop there. They believed sexual energy was life force, not a metaphor, not symbolism. The same energy that creates life, fuels ambition, sharpens awareness, and drives spiritual hunger. In Eastern systems, it was called prana or ojas. In early African and Middle Eastern teachings, it was simply understood as vital strength. Lose too much of it, and something inside you weakens. This is why constant release wasn't celebrated. It was questioned. Historically, frequent sexual release was seen as leakage. Not because the body couldn't recover, but because the mind and spirit slowly paid the price. The concern wasn't exhaustion the next day. It was erosion over time. Less discipline, less clarity, less inner resistance when temptation appeared in other areas of life. Many traditions taught that every release carried more than fluid. It carried intention, attention, focus. When that energy was spilled without purpose, it was believed to scatter the mind. You became easier to distract, easier to influence, easier to pull off your path. That's why warnings focused on what couldn't be measured. They didn't talk about hormones or dopamine. They talked about vision fading, willpower thinning, the quiet loss of spiritual sensitivity. The kind of changes you only notice when you try to sit still and can't. when you try to pray, focus, or commit, and something always pulls you away. To ancient thinkers, this wasn't coincidence. It was cause and effect. And here's the part most people overlook. If sexual energy is tied to creation, what happens when it's constantly spent on nothing that creates? That question is exactly where things start getting uncomfortable, because it leads to what they believed was happening beyond the physical world. Fantasy, imagination, and the spiritual doorway. The act itself was never the main concern. The mind was. Ancient spiritual teachings warned that imagination is not neutral. What you repeatedly picture, you slowly invite. Sexual fantasy, in particular, was seen as dangerous because it trains desire to exist without discipline, without boundaries, and without reality. Every time fantasy is indulged, the mind rehearses a pattern, not just of pleasure, but of escape. Instead of confronting loneliness, frustration, or unmet purpose, the mind learns to flee. Over time, that escape becomes automatic, triggered, almost involuntary. Many traditions believed that this was where influence begins, not in the body, but in the imagination. The images you return to, the thoughts you replay, the private narratives you feed. They believed the mind, once conditioned, becomes an open doorway, and whatever aligns with that pattern finds easier access. This is why fantasy was seen as more corrosive than the act itself, because the body forgets, the mind remembers. Over time, repeated imagery reshapes desire. Real intimacy starts to feel dull. Real effort feels heavy. Real connection feels complicated. But fantasy stays easy, instant, demanding nothing back. And according to old teachings, nothing demands nothing unless it plans to take something later. That belief leads directly to one of the most controversial ideas shared across cultures: the claim that repeated sexual fantasy doesn't stay internal forever. It forms attachments, and those attachments were given a name. The spiritual partner belief that alarms many. Across different cultures, the language changes, but the idea stays the same. They spoke of invisible companions, spiritual spouses, entities formed through repeated desire, fantasy, and private ritual. In some traditions, they were called spiritual husbands or wives. In others, they were described as parasitic influences that bonded through sexual energy. The belief was unsettling. Repeated sexual acts without a real partner were said to create a counterfeit bond, a connection without covenant, pleasure without responsibility. And once that bond formed, it didn't leave easily. These traditions claimed the attachment fed on attention and repetition. The more the habit continued, the stronger the influence became, not through fear, but through comfort, familiar urges, predictable thoughts. A pull that felt internal, even though it wasn't believed to be. People experiencing these attachments were said to report similar patterns: difficulty forming real relationships, sudden disinterest in intimacy with actual partners, cycles of isolation followed by guilt, even unexplained resistance to spiritual practices they once valued. The warning wasn't that pleasure was evil, it was that imitation intimacy trains the soul to accept substitutes. And here's what made the belief endure. Breaking the habit was said to weaken the attachment, starve it, silence it. Over time, clarity returned, desire reset, discipline resurfaced. But these teachings also warned that stopping wouldn't be smooth. Because once something feeds on repetition, it resists removal. Which is why ancient texts didn't just warn about the habit itself, they warned about the struggle that begins the moment someone tries to walk away. Biblical principles that fuel the debate. What unsettles many people is this: the Bible never names the habit directly, and that silence is intentional. Instead of focusing on the act, Scripture goes after the root: desire, control, direction of the heart. Jesus didn't warn about behavior first. He warned about where the mind goes when no one is watching, because what dominates the inner world eventually shapes the outer one. Lust, in biblical terms, isn't attraction, it's fixation, the kind that consumes attention and bends willpower. And once desire becomes unchecked, self-control starts to erode, quietly, gradually. The Apostle Paul pushed the idea even further. He described the body as a dwelling place, a vessel meant for something higher. That language wasn't poetic, it was practical. If the body houses purpose, then how it's used matters. This is why self-control was treated as spiritual evidence, not perfection, discipline. Biblical warnings weren't about guilt, they were about alignment. When desire leads, purpose follows behind. When discipline leads, clarity returns. And that's where the tension lives today. Modern culture frames restraint as repression. Scripture framed it as strength. One says release is freedom, the other says mastery is freedom. That contrast sets the stage for what happens when someone actually tries to stop, not for a week, not for a challenge, but long enough for the mind and spirit to react. And the first phase surprises almost everyone.
The first 30 days without it, this is where most people underestimate what they're up against. The first few days feel manageable, confidence is high, motivation feels real. Then the resistance shows up. Not physically, but mentally. Thoughts become louder, urges feel sudden, restlessness creeps in during quiet moments. This is the phase where many assume something is wrong. Ancient teachings said this reaction was expected. When a long-standing habit is removed, the mind searches for replacement. It doesn't miss the act, it misses the escape, the familiar release, the instant comfort. Without it, emotions that were previously numbed start surfacing. Boredom, frustration, loneliness, even old memories. This is why the first 30 days feel heavier than expected. Sleep patterns can shift. Focus can feel unstable. Some report irritation without knowing why. Others feel an almost magnetic pull back to the habit, especially during stress. Historically, this stage was described as the clearing period, when stored tension begins to surface. But something else starts happening too. Moments of clarity appear, short bursts of focus, a strange awareness of time, energy that has nowhere to go yet, but refuses to disappear. This is where the fork in the road appears. Most people turn back here, not because they can't continue, but because they don't understand what they're feeling. Those who push through describe the next phase as completely different, because once the mind stops fighting the absence, it starts reorganizing itself. And that's when the real shift begins. What reportedly changes by month 6. By this point, the noise quiets down. The urges don't disappear completely, but they lose authority. They stop feeling like commands and start feeling like suggestions. And that distinction changes everything. People who reach this stage often describe a return to something they didn't realize was missing. Focus lasts longer, decisions feel cleaner, procrastination loses its grip. It's not constant intensity, it's steadiness, a grounded kind of energy that doesn't rush or scatter. Emotionally, there's more balance, less reacting, less internal chaos. Situations that once triggered impulsive behavior now create pauses instead, space to choose. Spiritually, many report increased sensitivity. Prayer feels less forced. Reflection goes deeper. Silence becomes comfortable instead of restless. The mind isn't searching for escape, it's learning to stay present. Relationships shift too. Without constant fantasy shaping expectations, real connections feel richer. Eye contact lasts longer. Conversations feel more engaging.
Intimacy, when present, carries weight instead of urgency. There's less hunger and more depth. Ancient traditions described this stage as alignment returning, energy no longer leaking, attention no longer fractured, desire no longer ruling. But they also warned this is when people become careless, because progress creates confidence, and confidence can invite complacency. And that's why so many people, even after months of change, find themselves pulled back into old patterns, not suddenly, but subtly, through triggers they never saw coming. Why so many fall back even after progress? This is the part no one warns you about. Most relapses don't come from desire, they come from overconfidence. By this stage, life feels better, focus is sharper, discipline feels natural, and that's exactly when people stop guarding their mind. Old triggers don't look dangerous anymore. A little scrolling, a familiar thought, a moment of stress paired with boredom. Ancient teachings described this as the return test. Stress lowers awareness. Isolation weakens resolve. Fatigue dulls discipline. And the habit doesn't come back as temptation. It comes back as nostalgia, a memory of comfort, of ease, of something familiar during a hard moment. Another underestimated trigger is success. As clarity returns, people take on more responsibility, more pressure, more expectations. And when emotional weight increases, the mind searches for old shortcuts, not because it wants pleasure, but because it wants relief. This is why traditions emphasized structure, accountability, routine, not to restrict life, but to protect momentum. They believed freedom without discipline doesn't last. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Falling back doesn't erase progress, but it reveals where awareness slipped. The habit itself was never the final enemy. Automatic behavior was. Which leads to the deeper realization behind all of this. The real battle was never about stopping an act. It was about reclaiming control over attention, desire, and direction. And once someone sees that clearly, the conversation changes completely. Conclusion: the bigger picture. What all of this points to isn't just stopping a habit, it's reclaiming something deeper. Sexual energy, desire, and attention are more than impulses. They're indicators of where your mind, body, and spirit invest power. When misused or scattered, the impact isn't always obvious. Energy fades, clarity diminishes, and subtle attachments form that pull you away from purpose. But when you redirect that energy with intention, something shifts. Discipline grows, focus strengthens, emotional and spiritual clarity emerges, relationships deepen, life feels fuller, not just physically, but mentally and spiritually. The quiet lesson ancient traditions left behind is this: habits that seem private are never truly isolated. What you do alone shapes the way you move through the world, and the changes you notice after months of restraint aren't coincidences. They're proof that unseen forces respond to attention, choice, and willpower. So the question isn't just whether to stop, it's what you're willing to reclaim. The energy, the focus, the clarity, the unseen strength that could transform not just your body, but your mind and your life. The journey isn't easy. The temptation never fully disappears. But the reward isn't fleeting. It's enduring. And once you've glimpsed it, there's no going back to seeing the world in the same way again. Because when control returns, everything changes. Silently, powerfully, irreversibly.